Hi everyone, thank you for joining me today for this session all around the importance of training your workforce to use Microsoft 365. Just before we dig into the content, a quick introduction to myself. My name is Megan Warren. I'm a Microsoft certified trainer and I'm the Microsoft 365 coach here at Computer World. So I work with all sorts of organizations to roll out their training programs and drive that adoption through the likes of training within their organizations when it comes to Microsoft 365. As you can see on screen, I'm a community advocate, big community advocate. I like getting involved in the community through events, through social media, and through the blogs that I do as well. And then lastly on there, I'm also a mental health first aider. Something that I'm really passionate about is one, making sure that everyone can use the technology within 365, but also on the other side of that with the mental health first aider side of me, making sure that it isn't becoming a distraction, it isn't becoming too much for people, and actually that they're able to switch off when they need to. So, a little introduction to me. We'll now dig into the content. And before I wanted to talk around what to include in your training program and the importance of that and what elements you should have in that, I just quickly wanted to talk about the risk of not training your workforce. So, what risk does your organization face if you don't train your workforce to use Microsoft 365? So, many of you may recognize this guy. This may be you. This may be somebody else that you're aware of. And actually, this is the person that we see in an organization that rolls out the technology within 365 and just lets the users get on with it. They're sitting there, they've done their job, they've rolled out the technology, and they think everybody knows how to use it, and that it's actually bringing helpful products, helpful features, and functionality to everybody's role, and that everyone can be really productive using those. However, whilst he's sitting there saying that this is fine, as you can see, we've got the fire around him. And that's actually what will be happening in those organizations that do just roll it out. There'll be chaos happening around that person. Whether they're aware of it or not, it will be happening. And that's in the likes of people um, not actually knowing what applications there are within 365. So they're not getting the most out of them because they don't even know that they're there. Or maybe they do know that they're there and they think they're using it in the right way, but actually it's not the right way, it's not the most productive way, and it's not bringing any harmony to their role as such. And the biggest chaos that we see is that whilst everybody's using Microsoft 365 in their own way, it is then bringing discomfort, it's bringing chaos to the organization because everybody's using it in different ways. They don't know where to find information, they don't know where to store information, they don't even know how to send information. So everybody just works in the way they feel is best and most comfortable for them, but it's not actually working for the full organization. So it is a really big risk just to let the users get on with it because as we can see here, it will create chaos and you may not be aware of the chaos it is creating. So a lot of people, when they are rolling out a project for Microsoft 365 and they are rolling out the Microsoft 365 suite, usually focus on the element on the left-hand side of the page here, the technology side. They really see it as a technology project. They do all the technical stuff in the back end, they configure it correctly, and that's it. They wipe their hands with it and they're happy that that project is complete and in their eyes also is successful. At Computer World, we believe that this is not the only element to a Microsoft 365 project, whether that's migration, etc. That isn't the whole package. Alongside the technology part, which of course is incredibly important, without that part, it isn't a project in itself. But we also need to have the other two elements that we see on screen at the moment as well. So the first one of those is clarity. We need to make sure we're bringing clarity to the organization when we are introducing these applications. There are so many new ways to communicate, to collaborate involved with Microsoft 365 that you're introducing a whole new way of working to people. And without actually giving them the clarity of how you as an organization will be using those tools, how you as an organization will be communicating using them and collaborating, it again goes back to that previous slide with the chaos, the fire around him. This is where the clarity really settles that chaos and brings that. So it needs to be agreed how those tools are going to be used, and then that will be driven throughout the organization to bring everyone that clarity. And then lastly, we have the knowledge piece. Again, we can install the technology, we can tell everybody the clarity, but if we don't actually tell them how to do this and show them how to use the technology, again, they're not going to know how it's meant to be used and how they can use it. They'll just be using it in the way that they think is best. So we believe that it's only successful when you agree what's going to happen from the technology side and all the things you're going to implement, the settings you're going to have, which then we will define by the clarity. And some of these technical settings actually can't be complete, and this technical side of the project can't be complete until we have clarity, because we can't say which meeting settings, for example, we're going to have within Microsoft Teams until we know as an organization how that's going to be used. So we can do the technology side, but alongside this, we always need the clarity of how the organization is going to use those applications and then drive those skills and that knowledge throughout the workforce through the likes of training as well. So before we dig into what a training program should include, I imagine a lot of people are already sort of started this and have started rolling out Microsoft 365, and the users have started using it as well. So I think this is a good time for you to just sit here and reflect on some of these questions that you can see on screen here. And it just gives you a good opportunity to sit back and reflect if there are any areas that you need to go back and recap, cover again, if you can't answer any of these in the way that you desire. So we've got questions on here like how are your new users brought up to speed on your company standards? So that's that clarity piece around how is my organization using Microsoft 365? When I have a new person join the organization and they've used Teams or 365 in their previous organization, the way that they used it there may not be the same as we use it here. So, how do I make sure that they're aware of the way that we're using it in our organization quickly so that they don't become a disruptive person when they join the organization? So, how do I do that? Um, we've got things on how do people know how to best collaborate on files in Microsoft Teams. It's one of my favorite parts of Microsoft Teams, the fact that you can co-author on files. However, it can be quite daunting when people begin this, and even if you show them once, twice, it's still something that isn't natural for a lot of people who are used to working in ways to share a document via an email or to have it in a shared folder where actually it will lock somebody else out. So do my employees know? Do my users know how to do that? And are they confident? I think that's a really important part. They may know how to do it, but actually, how confident are they that they can do it, that they know how to do it, and that they are comfortable doing that co-authoring piece with their colleagues as well? And then the last one that I'm going to talk about here is if your users have questions about Microsoft 365, do they know where to find the answer? One, do they know where to go? And two, is it easy for them to find that answer? What we don't want is for people to have questions about how to use Microsoft 365, know that they have to log a service desk ticket, for example, and think, well, that's going to be a 4 hour SLA. I don't have time to wait that long. Oh, I'll just carry on using it the way I think I should be using it. And that could then be completely wrong. Again, it could be disruptive and it could just be a small kink in the chain that could then break it, cause that chaos again. So, actually, how do my users find the answers they have? And how do they find them quickly so that they can continue working in a productive way and continue working, getting on with what they need to be doing? So, as I said, I would just go back over these questions, just have a look over them, answer them for yourself, and any areas where you can't answer them in the way you desire, just go back and recap that sort of area of your project that you had here. So that really covered the sort of risk that we face when we don't train our workforce to use Microsoft 365. I now wanted to talk about what we should actually include in our program. And there may be elements of this that you've already started to implement or you've already implemented, but hopefully this will just give you an idea of what we at Computer World recommend should be included. And if there are any areas that you haven't included in your program, we could always go back and implement those now. The great thing about Microsoft 365 and the projects around Microsoft 365 is they're ever growing, they never end. There is always something more to do to make sure your users and your business is getting the most out of your investment in Microsoft 365. So I'm just going to talk around the elements we believe should be involved in a training program for Microsoft 365. The first one is you should assemble your champions. You should have a program in place for a champions program. And that really comes into two elements here. So the first part we've got is the first stage of the champions program, and that's your stakeholder champions. So these are the business leaders in your organization that recognize that there needs to be a change and they want to help drive that change as well. So these are going to be the business leaders that will support it, will be the driving force for it, and also will be able to help you define in this program what is actually important, not to me as an individual, but to our organization. So, what's going to make the biggest change and what matters to us most when we are driving this program? Once we have that defined, we can also talk about what success looks like. So, if we're trying to reach this point, how do we know we've actually been successful at that? At what point can we look back at this and say we have been successful with this program? So it's not going to be every business leader in your organization. It may be, but it's not always going to be those. It's going to be the people that really recognize that there needs to be change and want to drive that and support that change, whether that's in their departments, whether that's for the whole organization. They want to drive it, they want to support you with that as well. So that's the first lot of champions that we have here with the stakeholders. The next stage of this champions program then is people in your organization, the regular users in your organization. They can be managers or they can just be other employees in the organization. But these people need to come together to really be seen as the Microsoft 365 champions. And these people can be at that operational layer, as I said, but they really need to be people who want to drive the change and can drive that change. They need to be that person who's confident to be that point of contact when people have questions and be that person that will be happy to help their colleagues as well. There's been lots of studies done around how people learn and how people absorb content and new ways of working. And all the first thing that always comes out on top is people learn from their colleagues. That is the main way that people learn. So having this champions program where your colleague who sits next to you or sits in the office with you that you can just ask a question to is really important because that's the way that people learn the best. Um, this part of the program is really important to keep these people engaged, to engage them in the first place. And usually we say let them volunteer because at that point they're volunteering. And if they volunteered, they want to prove that they can make this change. They want to make sure you've made the right choice by letting them be in the champions program. So keeping them engaged and having them engaged at the start is really important. Once we have them engaged then and they've started this program with us, they understand that clarity and we start driving that knowledge and that skill through the training, they need to still be engaged and be that point of contact. We do often see a lot of people when they have people in champions programs, giving them slight benefits. So as an example, if you are a champion within an organization for 365, whenever you log a service desk ticket, your ticket goes to the top of the list because just as a way for the organisation to say thank you for your help, thank you for your support. We'll reward you by putting you on the top of the list, almost like a golden ticket to service desk. So it's small things like that that just keep people engaged, give them that benefit back, because it can be a lot of work for champions, especially at the beginning when the rest of the organisation is adapting to this new way of work. There's a lot of questions, a lot of disrupt at the start to get everybody on board. But actually, in the long run, those champions are the people that really drive this, support the program, and make it a success as well. So we had two parts there. We had the stakeholders, those business leaders that we want to get involved in the start to define that clarity and to define what success looks like. And then we have the rest of the champions, the champion program, that are the operational level that want layer that want to make the change and drive the change with their colleagues as well. So that's the first part that we recommend you have in your program. The next stage then is all around the training, and it's the first stage of this training, really. Anyone who watches Friends knows this reference. They don't know that we know we know. I can't even say it. But this is really highlighting that actually, if you don't drive that knowledge, if you don't teach everybody how to use the applications, they don't know what they don't know. So they'll just continue using the old applications that they had, and everything will still remain in email. Or they'll look at these new applications, think they know how to use it, and they'll use it in the way they think is right. So, what we recommend at Computer World is once you have the champions, once you've defined how the organization will use things like Microsoft Teams, is bringing everybody up to the same level. So doing that is through a session that we call a Brilliant Basics session. So that is just the basics within communication in Microsoft Teams through chat, meetings, and those all important settings. But with this, we're bringing everybody up to the same level. We're teaching them the basics. So we're giving them that clarity of this is how we as an organization use Microsoft Teams for communication. And we're showing them how it can be used. So they have that clarity, they have that knowledge, and actually there's harmony and consistency across the organization of how everybody is using Microsoft Teams. Now, we're aware that this only touches that communication layer, and we're going to go into a little bit around how the rest of your training should be adapted for the rest of the organisation. But because Teams play such a vital role within 365 and in businesses these days, especially around that communication piece, it is really crucial to make sure that everybody knows the basics and everybody is at the same level within here. So the first session we recommend and the first thing within your program when you start rolling out that training is the Brilliant Basics through Microsoft Teams to get everybody up to speed quickly. The next thing then within our presentation, within our training program is an art of the possible session. So this is something myself and my colleague Anthony do with organisations, and it tends to be those business leaders that are part of that champion stakeholder group that we have here. And this is really a 2-hour session where we show them all the possibilities that are within Microsoft 365. I say all the possibilities. We could never show all of the possibilities within 365 in 2 hours. Otherwise, we'd have to be talking at the speed of light. But we go through specific scenarios and really show them how Microsoft 365 can help help those challenges that businesses may be facing. So we recommend doing an art of the possible, really to get those stakeholders invested into this project. They're already invested because they recognise the changes there. But now what we need to do once they've got the change and they recognise that change is show them then how 365 can help those challenges and help make that change as well. So we recommend an art of the possible session. Um, Obviously, we have here the company way, and that is that clarity that the stakeholders then define. So this is the way our organisation is going to use Microsoft 365. These are the success factors that we are aware of, but this is how we're going to use it, and that really needs to be defined at the top of this sort of program to make sure we're doing this. And also what I'd say here is as we go through this layered approach that I'm going to show you in a moment, is it's always really important to come back to this top layer. It's always important to come back to say, are we one, still working in the way we said we were going to be working, and is that still the way that we defined? Because if it's not, we either need to change some of the part on the technology side if we have some settings that need to be changed, or two, we maybe need to sit back and reset a little bit to make sure that the rest of the training we do or any of the rest of the program we do comes back to reflect that company way again. We should never go away from that company way, because that is that clarity factor that we're giving everybody. And also make sure we can come back and say, look, this is what we said we would define us as successful. Are we being successful? If we're not, what do we need to change? And we just recommend always coming back to this on a regular basis, whether that's monthly, bi-monthly, anything like that, just to come back to reflect that back with those stakeholders to see how we're getting on. We then have the Teams Brilliant Basics training, as I said a moment ago, making sure everybody's at that same level within Teams and that communication side of it. And now we get on to the really interesting parts within the department. So as we can see here, we've got some example departments on here. And what's really important to mention here is not every department needs to know everything, and they don't all need to know the same information as well. So at this stage, after we've done the Brilliant Basics training, we then start meeting with the departments, and we start understanding, well, one, what are the challenges you're facing today? So what is the technology hindering you at the moment? Or what challenges are you just facing as a department, technology related or not? And from that, we identify what the department needs within here. So then we can match that to the training that they need. So we understand how they work, we understand their challenges, and we also maybe do art of the possible sessions with these departments, because that will help open up their mind as to what challenges Microsoft 365 could help them as a department face as well. So it's really important to identify those challenges, the way those department works on an individual basis, so we can really get a full picture of that department and what they need. Once we have identified those departmental needs we then start training them on what they need to know. So as I said, we don't want to overload them and make sure that they do every single session here. But actually, we may sit here and go, okay, we spoke to the finance team, and they obviously need to make sure that they're taking notes in any meetings they're having. So we'll do the note taking and meeting enhancement session. But also, it's really important for them to enhance team and collaboration. So we'll do that session with them as well. So we can go along and map the sessions that we have and the training programs that we have, which are these ones on the bottom here. We can map that to the departments and what's relevant to them. And it's also important here that we don't just take those specific training courses and those programs, take them off the shelf and then deliver them to the departments. Again, these need to be tweaked. They need to be tailored to those departments for their specific needs. So what's important to mention here is the teams are only learning what they need to know at this stage. They can obviously learn more further down the line, but we don't want to bombard them with information they don't need to know or show them too much that is going to be overwhelming and mean that they don't use it in the best way. So we're identifying their needs and then mapping the relevant courses, the relevant training programs to their needs that they have here as well. And whilst we do all of this within training, from the Brilliant Basics down to those departmental sessions as well, what is important is that you train the users on the elements that matter to them most, and you train them on the devices that matter to them and that they use the most as well. So as you can see on screen here, we've got Teams on a number of different devices. We've got a desktop application, we've got a mobile application, and then we've got the iOS or Android application. And all of these applications, whilst they all do the same thing with the same functionality, the buttons are all in different places across iOS, across desktop, across Windows or Android, anything like that. So actually, if I trained everybody, or you as an organization trained everybody on how to use Microsoft Teams on a desktop application, But then you had a bunch of users that were on the road, they always had their mobile device and they were always on iOS. The training you've just delivered to them for the Brilliant Basics or the departmental training that you deliver to them on a desktop application isn't relevant. And a lot of what you showed them doesn't work for them. So they're going to become frustrated with it, or they're just going to ignore the training because it wasn't done on the platform that they use. So we do recommend taking this sort of information into account and customizing it for the specific people, for the specific departments that you have, to make sure that the training is as relevant as possible to everybody across the organization. So the first thing there is across the devices, making sure that everybody is working in the way that is best for them. Um, but then also, what we say is that not everybody has the same learning style. That's a common thing that everybody knows across the world, that not everybody has the same learning style. So, whilst you are driving this change and driving this information with this knowledge and skill, giving everybody the same training and the same platform won't work for everybody because they have those different learning styles. So, whilst we do say that we do a live training session that is an hour and a half to 2 hours long on the brilliant basics within Microsoft Teams, that is a live session where it's demonstrating it through them watching it on a video. We understand that after that session, not everybody is going to have retained all of that information. It's a lot of new information that we're showing them. So after that live session, after you've done the big bang approach and got everybody up to that same sort of level and that speed, we then recommend giving them the training that works in the way that works for them. So as you can see on screen here, we've got things like videos in the top right corner, which are 90-second videos that just go over one little bit of the training that they can get in bite sized chunks. So if they're ever looking for some information, for example, how to leave a chat conversation in Microsoft Teams, they can find that specific part of the training very quickly, very easily, and they can watch that and get the answer quickly. They haven't got to go back over that 90-minute session and watch that again. It's just a quick 90-second session that they can find the answer very quickly. We then have in the top left corner, we have quick guides, which are written guides that people can print off and have on their desk if they want to, that tells them step by step in written format how to do the specific actions within the application. Or in the bottom right hand corner, we've got here step by step images with supporting text to show people how they do specific things in Microsoft Teams or the Microsoft 365 applications. So we can see here a number of different ways that people after the session can go then and absorb that content in the way that works for them. So they've seen that initial step. They're not going to have retained all of it, but then they can go back after the session and find that information in a way that works for them. And they're more likely to retain that information and actually use the knowledge and skill that they learned from that because they were able to absorb it in the way that worked for them. So do it on the device that works for them, but also then once they've had that initial training, make sure you're giving them multiple ways to absorb the training after the live session. Something else to consider then in your Microsoft 365 training program is how do we keep people up to date? Microsoft constantly update the applications within Microsoft 365. There's always a new feature that they're working on to help organizations. So, how do we make sure that our users are updated on the latest features or the latest functionality, the new applications that are coming, or even something as simple as a button within Teams meeting has moved from the drop down to the left hand side, which has happened quite recently. And it's something that you may consider as quite small, but can actually really disrupt a meeting if that is the case, or actually throw in a new feature or functionality that people aren't aware of, or actually may just find incredibly useful if they were aware of it. So, how do we make sure that we're updating everybody on this Microsoft 365 life cycle? Whether that's they've had the training 3 months ago and you just want to update them on the new features, or it's somebody new coming into the organization and you want to get them up to speed very quickly. How do we do this and how do we make sure everyone's up to speed? And this is also across the users, but it's also across the administrators as well. How do we make sure that the administrators are aware of the latest changes that have come to Teams Admin Center, for example? It's something that needs to be constantly considered, constantly driven within your organization. As I said at the start of this, a Microsoft 365 project never ends. It's constantly ongoing because of the changes that are always coming to the applications within here as well. So it's really important to consider, how do I make sure that everybody in my organization is kept up to speed with the new changes? And I will also say here, this is an incredibly important part where the champions really come into play. Because if you're updating the champions on a bi-monthly or quarterly basis of what the new changes are within 365, when they're then implemented into the organization, the users then have that point of contact with the champions to ask where the button's gone, or how do I do this? What's this new feature that I've seen pop up? The champions will have that knowledge, they will have that skill to demonstrate it, and they can help drive that change rather than you having to start again with that big bang approach with another session with everybody. The champions can just roll that out at their own speed and make sure everybody's up to speed with that. So there was a lot to consider there in terms of what to include in that program. We went through the champions program. We went through making sure that you do the teams training, making sure you're customizing the training for your users and your departments, making sure you're giving them the training in the way that suits them to suit their knowledge style. And then we've obviously got the part around, how do we make sure we're managing that Microsoft 365 life cycle, sorry. We have a platform called Adopt 365 that is a Microsoft 365 dedicated training and adoption platform that allows people to absorb this training in the way that works for them. So a lot of that slide that I spoke around the different uh, types of training that they may need, we have on Adopt 365. So I've just got Adopt 365 on screen now, and I'm just going to do a quick tour of it. We've got all of the different applications within 365 down the side here. And within each of these applications, what we have is playlists, which are short, sharp, bite-sized pieces of content that allow you to absorb the content in the way that works for you. So as you can see, we've got a 2-minute 48-second video there on how to set your notifications in Microsoft Teams. We've got images that go through how to do it and show you where to click with the supporting text. So we've got those playlists here with those bite-sized pieces of content. What we also have here is live training. So every month, myself and my Microsoft colleagues at Computer World will be conducting live training sessions on Adopt 365 on different subjects. So we can see here we've got one on online meetings and making sure they're effective. Alongside these training sessions, we also have live chat. So users can pop on to Adopt 365, they can ask us any questions they have related to the live training or not, and they'll always have a Microsoft colleague from Computer World on hand to answer those questions. We have things like blogs and podcasts. We have a monthly podcast, all aimed at users and champions of 365 to help them get the most out of the platforms and the technology within here. And we talk around our top tips and tricks within here as well. But what we also have is blogs on here around specific things within 365 that maybe don't have a definitive answer and aren't part of that playlist of this is how you do X, Y, and Z. This one is very open of where should I save my documents in 365. We go into this blog to explain what OneDrive is, what Teams is, and then we've got a nice image here which really just defines that and sort of puts that on as an example, and people can follow this if they need to answer that question for them as well. We also have things on here like the quick guides that I spoke about earlier that allow people to print those off and have those on their desk if they like that more traditional style of learning within here. So this is available for all of the applications within 365. There's search functionality, so if people have questions to find out how to do something specific, they can search it and find the information very quickly. And then there's also an element on this platform which is all around your company way. So that clarity that we defined. If you have things like communications charters that we really recommend you create when implementing 365 to just help define how your organization uses chat against emails, against Teams posts with communication to define all of that. We can upload those specific organizational documents that you have to this area, which is called the and your company name way, where you're also able to then come and bookmark and tag specific areas of the platform that are already on here into that as well. So it can really be that go-to place for that clarity of how your organization uses Microsoft 365. So that was just a quick demonstration of Adopt 365. Um, and I just now wanted to recap over everything we've spoken about in this session. So we obviously went over the risk of not training your workforce to use Microsoft 365. What the risk of that is not providing any clarity or consistency for your organization, and actually most likely just introducing a lot more chaos to the way people work within there. So we spoke around what to include that in your training program around the clarity, making sure everybody is aware to begin with how the organization is going to use Microsoft 365 and what does success look like in this project, making sure we're implementing that clarity standard throughout the project right from the get-go. We want to make sure we've got that champions program in place with really engaging stakeholders that are going to help provide that clarity, help drive that change. And then the operational layer of champions as well that are going to work with their colleagues to make sure that everybody's up to speed on how to use Microsoft 365. We then spoke around teaching the brilliant basics, making sure everybody is at that base layer of the minimal sort of standard that everyone should be at to use Microsoft Teams to make sure everybody's using it in a consistent way. We then went on to customizing that training, making sure you're teaching people one, what they need to know, but also in the way that works for them, providing those multiple formats of training, and then delivering that continuous program as well. How do you manage that life cycle of Microsoft 365? So they're just some of the things that we recommend you consider within your training program in Microsoft 365. Here at Computer World, we're able to help with every element that we've just gone through in terms of this business change, this cultural project that you were working on with Microsoft 365. So we have business change consultancy services with my colleague Anthony, who is able to come into your organization, understand the challenges you're facing, understand what you want to get from Microsoft 365, and actually help drive the change and help provide that clarity and build things like communications charters that we recommend you create as well. He's able to come into your organization and fully grasp the knowledge and the clarity that you want to get from this to help drive this change. We have technical design for Teams, for Teams calling. We can help with SharePoint as well. So any technical design, configuration, and architectural services you need, we're able to help with. We can help with the champions programs. We can help put the champions program together, what that looks like, but also help engage with those champions and be a point of contact for those champions. Whilst the users are coming to the champions may sometimes need somewhere to go if they have any questions. We're happy to be that point of contact for those champions. We're able to do training services, so whether that's the live training for that brilliant basics big bang approach, we can deliver that training. But also through Adopt 365, we have constant updates on Adopt 365. We can do the live training on there, which your organization can sign up to and have that on demand, on hand training for all of your users whenever they need it. So they always have a way to go and a place to go to ask any questions, to find any answers about Microsoft 365 that they may have. And we also have support and managed services around Microsoft 365 and wider business as well. So with that, I'm ready to wrap up this session. I wanted to give everyone a chance to win 3 months free access for up to 100 users of Adopt 365. So if you scan the QR code on screen and complete that form, somebody will be a lucky winner to win 3 months free access to Adopt 365. So I'll just leave that on screen for a couple more seconds for people to scan should they want to. And if you did want to know any more information about what Adopt 365 contains, what information is on there, you're also able to book a 30-minute session with myself and my colleagues to understand what Adopt 365 can offer you, what information's included in there, and what your users can get from the platform. So we can do a demonstration of Adopt 365 with questions and answers to show you all of the possibilities that are within there as well. Thank you very much for joining my session, everybody. I hope you enjoy the rest of Define Tomorrow.